Alrighty, I'm just sitting here trying to design something, trying to get like a suit shoulder thing to work. Mucking around with a few old bed sheets, trying to get the general shape of it. Been watching, in the meantime, quite a lot of these things on arranged marriages. It's fairly interesting now. Needless to say, there's a number of arranged marriages in this country due to the Indian population and, of course, also the Muslim population. It's good not to bang your elbow on a sewing machine. Yeah, very different. There's really two classes. There's one that's grab that, forced marriage, and there's one that's an arranged marriage, and they're two very different cases. Sometimes there's subtle difference where it's simply peer pressure, so to speak, from your family, or more or less duress that girls are forced into marriage, essentially under duress, and you know, that's your forced marriage scenario. Then you've got your arranged marriage scenario, which is, I believe, a very smart concept. You know, you look at the current situation, the sort of shit that I'm battling through. You go out there, you know, and the girls, first of all, their interest is based on looks. And, you know, if I'm not dressed well, or I've got a beard like I have now, or whatever, you know, you look a little bit hairy and scary, and, you know, you might not go that well, especially when you're starting to go a little bit bald, as I am, you know, and so you've got guys out there who have already got a huge advantage, and many of those guys are players, and they you know, use their looks to their advantage and go through girls like toilet paper. Essentially speaking, you know, the initial attraction when you're trying to date is how good you look. You know, and I'm not saying I'm 100% ugly bastard, but all the same, you know, the years are ticking on, and I'm not who I was when I was frickin' 22. I'll put it like that. And still, even if I was who I was when I'm 22, there's still guys that look way better than me. The long and short of it is, you know, that's the yardstick they start with, is how good you look. And then initially you go on a few dates, and you know, I mean, I haven't got a great heap of dates under my belt, but all I've got to do is listen to my cousins talking, and you know, there's always something they can dig up that isn't quite perfect, that isn't quite right. You have a bit of an off day, you're in a bad mood, you're still pissed off about work, and then she takes it as though, he was in a shitty mood, and therefore, you know, I didn't feel comfortable, so therefore she doesn't like you. Because you're not in a 100% smiley mood every single time, you know. I'm not joking, and I should show this one. There's a web page, one of those online magazines I was reading. There's a girl there who was 37. She was pregnant by a sperm donor. Found a guy who actually accepted the fact she was pregnant by a sperm donor, matched his personality and all this quite well, until they went out for a date, and he ate a lot of fries, and I've got an excuse to eat a lot of fries because I'm pregnant, but he ate as many as I would, and therefore is a glutton, and broke up with him over the fact of how many fries he ate on that date. I'm not joking. 37 years old, you need a sperm donor to even have a chance, and you're whinging about a guy who's not fat, but just eats a lot. And he eats more than me. Well, you know, I probably eat more than a pregnant girl myself, you know, and you just sit there going, fucking hell. First of all, get together over looks. Secondarily, start picking holes to the end of the earth. Dig a hole to China if need be to find an excuse as to why he isn't Mr. Perfect. My sister has the theory that this is the result of a culture of young girls growing up watching Disney and seeing Disney princesses where Mr. Perfect Prince comes along and accepts girl, and girl's special because she's a princess, and that means she's on a pedestal for all intensive purposes above everybody else, and then Mr. Perfect rich prince comes along and picks her up and takes her away to his castle / mansion in the good end of town. And it's, you know, the same shit goes on, and it doesn't matter if they look like a bulldog, they still have that belief, and I've seen that sort of shit playing out. Girls with more baggage than I could fit in the back of my car, and then yet still they have that attitude of, you know, I'm a little princess, you know, and it's, you know, single mums living in a caravan, or what you know in the US is a camper trailer, in their parents' backyard with a moustache and 2 kids to 3 different guys or some bullshit story, and, you know, we want some guy who's earning over $1,000 a week, blah, blah, blah. Oh, come on. You know, there's not that, you know, and anything that there is, it's all based on looks, and then there's like a flustering excuse to try and break up with it. Never mind, you're 37 and pregnant, he eats too many fries. What the fuck? Like, it's just pathetic. It's beyond a joke. And, you know, it's a system that, well, has basically proven that it's failed. In fact, I even have an article, which I also should show, that was taken from a newspaper and reprinted in this booklet I have. It was taken from 1990 in reference to what they call C-phobes, which is commitment phobes, and it talks about this same shit happening 28 years ago. That's right. Now the writer talks about some of her female friends who, you know, were in Sydney, and they, when they're in Sydney, they're missing the excitement of their life. And this was a lawyer friend of hers who they missed the excitement of Manhattan and their New York boyfriend when they're in Sydney. And then they'd leave Sydney and they'd miss the laid-back, relaxed attitude of Australia and quite possibly Sydney, although I couldn't really say that about Sydney myself, but the relaxed attitude of Australians and, you know, her Sydney boyfriend. And it was like she couldn't work out if she wanted to be in Sydney or in Manhattan, you know, and it's just like, you know, and the years are rolling on and she's still picking and fussing. And I looked at the date that this thing had been printed and it was 1990, and I was like, holy smoke, that's 28 years ago. Inevitably, I can see within my own family that this sort of a dating system is failing bloody miserably. As over the years I've worked with Vietnamese, Chinese, who were all married off before age 26. They wonder what the hell's going on. And quite frankly, if they're all married off before the age of 26, and I'm sitting here at 36, what the hell is going on? It's one of these things, you know, it's a failed culture, brought on in a world where the religion is consumerism and quite possibly football, in my state at least. Australian rules football, and it's referred to almost as a religion here. And you see how crazy they are about it and you'll understand. And, you know, football and consumerism. And, you know, and it's all perverted our culture to a course that ultimately is bringing down the culture to a level of a gradual destruction of the Anglo-Australian culture. And it's not just here, it's Italy, it's Japan, it's America, it's England, it's rippling through Europe. It's bad enough in France, so I'm told, and you know, maybe not so bad in France, but some of the divorce laws in France are frickin' bullshit. You know, when you're in France, if your wife has an affair during the time of your marriage and she has a child from that affair that has no genetic relationship to you, you are forced to pay child support, not the person who actually fathered the child that she had an affair with. You're forced to pay child support for that kid that you never fathered. That's how fucked up things are in France. You know, there's a lot of bullshit. And you look at the way some of these other cultures are, as I have been over the last few days, involving arranged marriages, and the long and short of it is they come in there and they sit down and they go smack bang straight into practicality. So what they're basically doing is the practicality of, you know, what do you want? One of the first things you do is you sit down and you write down, I want a girl who does this, does that. You know, a girl who, you know, you don't start writing down, I want a girl with big titties and blah, blah, blah. You know, what you do is you hit the practical straight away. The sexual is just absolutely so far in the background that it's almost not considered. I'm not saying it's not considered full stop, but it's almost not considered. And they stick to the practical. And they say, right, what do we want? Well, I want 3 kids. Well, I want a husband with this or that, boom, boom, boom. And he writes down, you know, I want several kids. You know, am looking for a girl who is willing to have a job before we have kids. Or I'm looking for a girl who wants to start a family fairly soon. I expect this of the girl, I expect that of the girl. You know, do basic house tasks or whatever, you know, and it's sort of where you're at in life, you know, like in my case, you know, live alone, own the house that I live in completely, you know, I want a girl who is willing to live in the country, boom, 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 and you get straight to the point. You don't sit there arcing and narking around about their looks and then fumbling and bumbling that they eat too many fries in one sitting and that's good enough to break it off with them. It's sheer bullshit. It's emotional bullshit. So you stick to the practical with arranged marriages. And you just write down a frickin' list and you compare notes. That's the first part. Initially you won't see the girl, but the first real part, you know, when that sort of, you know, emails or documents get handed around and that's sort of, you know, what you're aiming for, or the matchmaker gets that document, you know, then they say, well, we've got a girl who probably fit all that stuff, you know, and there'll be different, you know, very practical based questions, you know, do you expect to live in the city, you know, could you handle living in the country or not, like, you know, what compromise, and it's almost like a business deal sort of setup. So no one's going to, you know, get offended or anything like this. You're just basically hashing out a deal on practical purposes. From there, you go ahead to more or less get an interview by the father. And, you know, he works out, you know, they're sort of got to work out that you're within a similar class, not that you're coming from a trailer trash bill with no money and a welfare mum or whatever, and you know, you're trying to marry into a bunch of rich lawyers, you know, which is understandable. You know, similar enough background in a way. That could present a problem for me with a difference in culture, but you got to realise that, you know, some of these people that, you know, they've been born here, so is it that bad? And, you know, they take on some parts of their culture and maybe not so much other parts of their culture. And, yeah. So then the next question of all this is, like, your personality compatibility. Now, their belief is generally that their parents will have a fairly good yardstick on personality compatibility, having brought you up as their child. And they sort of run on that. You know, and they go through that and they look at it all and say, well, look, you know, she's a you know, very clean person who's very arty. She's probably not going to match you too well, Link, because you're not an arty person and you're not, you know, very clean or whatever, you know, but if she's a bit of a tomboy or whatever and she's more, you know, into this or that, or likes doing a bit of gardening, or, you know, something that's sort of more compatible than a clean, neat girl who has everything perfectly organised and, you know, spends more time watching Netflix than outside, well, you know, then they probably turn around and say, this ain't going to roll. And you just, you know, you get over it and you move on. You know, there's no real thing. If it seems that there is a thing, then you meet the girl with the rest of the family. Sometimes you meet them initially, but usually it's an interview with the father. There's a little trick to all this, so I'm finding out, that helps you along astronomically, that I'm reading between the lines, and it's very simple. You make friends with the father initially, and you have an astronomical chance because they already know you and think you're a fairly reasonable guy. And, you know, they're not going to sit there and say, oh, well, you know, we'll all hook up, blah, blah, blah. You know, if you're really not anything like their daughter, you know, they're just going to say, oh, well, don't even bother. It's just, she would just, you know, she's just not the girl for you. It just wouldn't work out. You know, and that's fine. That's fine to hear that, but at least, you know, you don't put your heart and soul into this girl. You don't put all your emotional stuff into this girl that you're attracted to and kiss, hug, all the other stuff, and then she just turns around one day and says, you know what, it's not working out, and you just about feel like you're being shot in the chest, you know. And I don't know, you know, I know there's a lot of heartless guys out there, but I tell you what, from what I've seen, there's girls out there who are heartless enough to probably shoot you in the face, you know, emotionally speaking. They'd be quite happy to do it. They're just, it's like there's just no holds barred on them throwing you into any pain. But this is the thing, if you've never been in any sort of sexual attraction to begin with, there ain't going to be that much blasted pain, is there? Because you never really deeply got involved with them. So, you know, you ain't going to be so wounded if you never really, you know, were highly sexually attracted to them or you know, had already been banging them anyway. And this is the thing, you avoid emotional injury as a result of keeping it so damn businesslike during these times, you know. And this is the thing, that they also say that having the parents there brings stability and logical thought to the situation, as opposed to you getting love blinded and she getting emotional or you know, crabby or whatever, you know. They sort of act as a bit of a buffer, and I didn't quite understand what they meant with that until I thought about, you know, how when you're sort of emotionally involved, your logic goes out the bloody window sometimes, you know, and some of you have probably experienced all that, you know, love blindness and stuff like this, and just trying to make a go of it on an emotional level, not thinking of it in practical terms, you know, and you know, I sort of look at it, and it's sort of, I honestly believe that that's what I was looking for years ago. I always used to say I'd love to sit down and, without knowing anything about, really speaking, about arranged marriages that much, other than hearing horror stories of these forced marriages and stuff like this on TV, I didn't really realise how, you know, I always used to say I'd love to sit down and just cut a deal with someone, just go through and just write it out like a blimmin' business deal, you know, and what are you willing to bring to the table, what I'm willing to offer, boom, 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 you know, where I'm at, where you're at, you know, live in a house on my own that I completely own, got a job, yes, it's 3 days a week, but if we get another salesman, I might be able to go to 5 days a week if I request it, I hope. And I probably think I could, because I've been there down there a year and a half now, so the boss actually told me the other day, he said, oh, you're more or less permanent because you've been here so damn long anyway. You know, and this is the thing, you sort of see stuff like, you know, I have these ideas of a lot of things being essentially deals, and many of them are unwritten deals, and there's a lot of unwritten expectations, but to me, just to sit there and make almost a business deal with someone, that would be the ultimate, because to me, I would feel like we're getting somewhere. Versus, you know, hanging around with a girl for 6 months who then decides you're not damn hot enough, or you swear too much, which would probably be the case with me, or, you know, you should be earning more, or some other stuck-up horse shit, and then, you know, you just get fairly badly wounded out of it, and I've been wounded so many times that I'm almost numb to any of that shit anymore. But that's the thing, I can always remember saying I wish I could just sit down and make a bloody written deal like a contract, never knowing that you can actually do that. And that's the way arranged marriages actually essentially work. And it might be a full blowout, but it's sort of hashed out on a non-emotional level. And you're not marrying for love. And one of the things they pointed out was that if someone is an arsehole, and you're sort of seeing that they're, you know, a bit of a bitch, but you don't really see it too much because you're only with them 12 hours a week. Your love for them, your love blindness can gloss over any uncomfortable facts, any nastiness, any warning signs that something might not be right for the long term. That can be glossed over by love blindness. And it's very dangerous for love blindness to gloss over problems that mightn't be too bad if you only spend 12 hours a week together, but when it comes to actually 24/7 after you're married, these small problems that your love blindness would gloss over then fester like hell because you're there 24/7, you know, and that's a trouble with taking it from a love perspective initially. Now, of course, guys being guys, you know, they see a nice-looking girl, and I mean, you might say you can't see much with a Muslim girl because of the way they dress. You'd be surprised what you can see. I've worked with Muslim girls before, and you know, you can tell if you've got a fat mama or a skinny mama, you know, and you can still see their face. But with Indian girls, there's nothing, you know, they wear normal westernised clothes, so you've got no worries. And so do a surprising amount of Muslims too. You'd be shocked with the amount of non-practicing Muslims who just dress like Westerners all the time, you know, and one of these things, you know, that, you know, you can see a pretty face. Unless they've got the full blooming, you know, Ned Kelly style blooming hijab on, you know, whatever it's called again. One's a burqa, one's a hijab, I forget what's what, but you know, a lot of them have that whole open face thing. They're almost dressed like a nun, you know, and you can see their face and you can see if they're pretty or not. You might not be able to see their hair, but, you know, you get a general idea if she's got a nose like a bloody attractive player or not, you know, and, you know, with Indian girls, nothing's hidden really, and, you know, this is one of these things where you sort of, like the guys have a look and the girls have a look at you and you sort of work out, well, they don't look too bad, but you don't sort of dwell on that or get obsessive on it. So it's not like you're marrying, you know, a goddamn letterbox or a fucking cardboard box with a hole in the front that's painted black. You know, like it's just, guys do look at some girls and they sort of go, right, well, yeah, like that's pretty good. And you have that chance that you see each other, you get to make that decision. But that's like not the big one. What you're doing is you're focusing on your practicality and your personality compatibility. And I think that is what a marriage is about, because marriages don't last on the size of a boobs and the prettiness of a face. They really last on the basis of personality compatibility and your ability to work as a couple in raising a family. So I think they've got it all right. And, you know, like I once upon a time, a long time ago, made a video that said, is the white way, Western white way, the right way? And I sort of talked a little bit about, you know, Aboriginal cultures and stuff like that in that. You know, of course, someone dropped a comment, yes, it is. You know, I can guarantee you they didn't listen to the video, but they just dropped in a comment that said, yes, it is. Next stupid question. You know, well, this is the thing. The automatic assumption that your culture has the answer to everything is bloody naive, for a start. And with that assumption, you also then miss out on any possible opportunities to gain better systems and perspectives and methods and strategies and tactics from other cultures that could have helped you, but you just put your blinders on, you put your little horse blinkers on the side of your head and you just continued forward, regardless. No, this is the way my culture's always done this. Well, that's great, you know, but for all intents and purposes, the culture has so terribly changed from when my parents were married. And the sheer statistics will tell you that it is no longer bloody working. So why sit the blinders on and try and go the traditional way when the traditional way is no longer working in this culture due to Disney princessism, due to consumerism flooding what was left of our traditional culture, due to, you know, I'm not saying it's all bad, but aspects of feminism that you know, put women on a pedestal to the point that they're so far above men that they will no longer consider them as equals. And that, in a nutshell, is third wave feminism. To me, it's a form of supremacy, almost like white supremacy, but it's like a sexist supremacy. You know, when they're sitting there when a man tries to explain something and he's automatically disregarded because he's quote-unquote mansplaining, when they're wailing about microaggressions, these are horseshit concepts of first world problems and supremacy, you know, female supremacy, whereby you're no longer considered an equal. So how the hell can you marry someone if you're not an equal to them? You know, you say, well, you know, the man's the head of the household and that makes him look better than a woman. Well, you know, still at the same token, you can't just run around with some autocratic rule and sort of, you know, force your wife into submission because she's going to hate it and the marriage is going to fall to bits if she's just the slave and you're the master. It just doesn't work that way. You know, it is a negotiation between the two. And you have goals that you may want to meet, and this is a great idea with arranged marriage, that you can actually sit down, write down these goals and say, look, I want to have children within the next 3 years, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, you just define what you want, and they define what they want, and you may well jiggle away at a deal and work out a compromise, and she might say, well, you know, I'm too young to have kids friggin' straight away, you know, maybe I'll get around to it in 2 years' time. And you say, well, okay, I can handle that 2 years' time, you know. She might decide she wants certain things. She might decide she likes to have baths, so therefore I've got to get myself a bath and you know, and build that into the house, you know. Different things like that, you know, are there that, and you just work through it, and you work it, and if it's all just hits a bloody brick wall, well, it hits a brick wall, and you go talk to the next woman. But you weren't deeply, desperately in love with her, trying to fondle her every 5 minutes, and then, you know, you got that heartbreak because you went in there on a practical term initially, and that's how you keep, you know, dealing with it on level terms, not on emotional terms. Because, well, you think of simple things like buying a car. So you buy a car based on an emotional decision, and what happens? Oh, I love this massive big BMW, blah, blah, blah. you know, or like a girl I know who loves VW Beetles, and she come across one that was convertible and she wanted to buy that straight away, and I said, frick it, hell. Parts are getting hard to come by. I don't trust the things. They're air-cooled. You know, they're not exactly the quietest machine. You know, you're going to have trouble getting parts. You know, you know, it's the same with, oh, you know, I should have a big BMW because they're great. They're cool. You've seen how many frickin' problems those things have with cooling systems. Who the hell builds a car with a dual electric water pump that's supposed to circulate the hot water, but they've got the two electric pumps inside one plastic housing, and if that one housing cracks, both of your pumps are buggered straight away, and then your vehicle overheats. Add to that a badly designed thermostat system, and you've got a car with some of the biggest coolant issues that is going to cost you some of the highest priced parts to fix. And if you cook that engine from overheating from coolant issues, you might as well just throw the bastard away, because the repair costs will be enough to choke a frickin' donkey. You know, and this is, oh, but I love that. It's an emotional decision. You got to think of the practical. So then you end up buying a Ford or a Chev or a Toyota or something that's practical and realistic, not dreamy with obvious problems, model after model after model. They have these frickin' coolant problems with them, and it's just a shit designer coolant system. But they didn't stop there. They went years, you know, and made all these ones of these shit coolant systems year after year after year, you know. And this is the thing. You need to make practical decisions on this. You know, they say, oh, well, how can you be with a girl that you don't love? Well, this is the thing. Because you're working together as a team towards the same goals, love will come later. Now, you might be surprised to know that there's quite a number of Muslim marriages where they don't actually consummate the marriage for 6 months, for 9 months, for a year, you know, but they work well enough as a couple, and with it later comes love, you know. But there's other ones who, you know, they know this guy and that guy and whatever, you know, down at the mosque or whatever, and on occasion, you know, they might see him, you know, his daughter from a distance or whatever, or just see him sitting in the car while he pulls up to their house or whatever, you know, and they know who's who. They get to know who's who, and, you know, and they know they're not going to be marrying a complete bulldog, you know, and there's that option to at least see them and talk to them, obviously, before you marry, you know, with what's his name, with, you know, Muslim marriages, and of course with Indian marriages, it's far more open than it is with those Islamic marriages. But this is the thing, you know, you've started off on the right foot, not the he looks hot foot, which lands you with a bloody player who's got frickin' kids all over town and girls all over town, that you were never going to, you know, bring. And the other thing is with all that, there's all this stupid shit idea in the West that you can get a man, and I'm going to get the man I like, and I'm going to, you know, he's a player, but I'm going to make him be a husband. It doesn't bloody work like that. You can't, you know, someone is only ready for marriage when they decide they're ready for marriage. And you can't force a player, you know, or a party girl for that matter, into a long-term marriage and think it's going to hold them there by somehow, you know, getting pregnant and trapping them into a marriage, which is a very, very dastardly mistake that some women make. And this is the thing. You know the girl's ready to marry. Why? Because she actually went ahead and told her parents, I want to get married. She's written down what she wants for a marriage. She's written down her expectations on a piece of paper, and you've either seen it or you've had it emailed to you, and it's just there, straight up, no question about it. You know, they either are ready or they aren't ready, and you just, you know, that's one of the things. And then there's, you know, what they expect, and it's all just written down on paper. At such a practical level that I swear that's the sort of stuff I've been looking for years. People who can just talk on a bloody logical level and come to a deal, you know. And truth be told, like, I don't know how many of you have seen Bill Burr. He's an American comedian and he sometimes does talks on feminism and stuff like that. And, you know, he does jokes. He does a joke routine and one of them involves feminism and stuff. And, you know, one of the ones he made, it was, you might hear it, it was the one about Arnold Schwarzenegger and how your dick is programmed to fuck 85% of the women in the room, you know, and you've got it there nagging away at you, and it's almost like its own motivational speaker, you know. and it's, I'm not saying that, you know, all guys are perverts, but what I'm saying is that side of instinct, you know, is pushed fairly hard, and it is indeed true that, realistically speaking, if you had to, well, even if you didn't have to, you could probably bang 85% of women out there. Even if you didn't need to, because it's one of these things that for men being sexually attracted to girls isn't that hard to do. It really isn't. You know, and henceforth you can sort of learn to love a chick so long as she doesn't look like a bloody bulldog, you know, or she isn't just a complete mess. You know, and some girls are, and there's some guys who like them fat chicks that like hop in the bathtub and there's no water left in the bathtub because there's just as big flabby guts in there. You know, it's, you know, there's guys who can go for a lot of stuff, and there's a handful of guys who can't go for some things. But the majority of guys can stomach far more women than you may have thought possible. So when it comes to that sort of stuff, at least, I don't know, I can't speak for women, but at least from the man's side, you know, you can learn to love things. And I know from my own experience, you can learn to fall in love with a girl just so long as she's not looking like a complete bulldog. You know, and so that's that there. But I've been told that just simply, you know, I think one of my mum's Indian friends said this. They knew some Indians, and they sort of said that, like, because you're working together at the same goal, you sort of fall in love with each other because you're on each other's team, you know, because you're working as a team. That sort of naturally causes you to, you know, to be in love, sort of thing, you know, because you're both working towards the same goal, and it's inevitable that even if you don't feel attraction initially, you will as time goes on. If you know, the men's qualities shine through, or for the women, or the man just has that little bastard down there saying do it all the damn time, you know. And it's a terrible thing to admit, but it is bloody true that, you know, men and the whole blooming, you know, the thing with all that is they just, you know, they are programmed to find almost anything attractive, and it's an embarrassing thing to admit, but quite honestly I can tell you it's fairly accurate, you know. It's just so long as a girl isn't like about as wide as the back end of a bus, well, you know, you're usually fine. And then there's some guys that specifically go for girls that are as big as the back end of a bus, you know. But anyway, that's just some of my little musings, and I better continue on here with me sewing, and yeah.